These things apply to, well, not just sport, but certainly sport.
Well, Saul, I'm not sure how many other people on board have coached individual sports. I know I have in high school only. But of course, our primary sport is hockey, which maybe has a lot to learn from some of the other sports. So I think they're all really valuable. So
Well, it's interesting, Wally, because one of the things I did in the golf book, I mean, I basically finished it, and then I got the idea. I went to three NHL players who I had worked with for a long time. I mean, like several seasons, not just a couple of sessions. And I asked them, they were all keen golfers. One of them is Morris, actually, Morris Lukowich. The other two guys, one was Cliff Ronning. Cliff played 19 seasons. The other was Brett Hedican, who played 17 seasons. And I asked them the stuff that we worked on to help them play hockey at a higher level. How are they using that? Are they using any of those techniques? And how are they using those techniques to enhance their golf game? And it was really interesting what they said. So there's no question that, I mean, I can't think of two sports much different than hockey, which is a high speed, physical contact team sport, and golf, which, as you point out, is an individual sport. It's not high speed. There's not much physical contact unless it's Happy Gilmore style golf. And yet, a lot of stuff transfers over: the visualization, the self-talk, the emotional management stuff, the breathing work to control your emotional intensity. And of course, all this leads to confidence and commitment and everything else.
well, for everybody that's on, if you have any specific questions, Saul, over the years, I've worked with a number of coaches across the country mentoring. One of them is Matt Holmberg. He's coaching the female team at Queen's University. Now, Matt gave you a wave. I don't know if you saw it or not, but a while ago, Matt was on, and Matt left his law practice,
Yes.
10 years of law practice, dedicating himself to the female game, and he's waking up more excited every morning than he ever has. But when I was out with any of these coaches, and I've worked with a lot of them that are on board, everything you've talked about, the visualization, the imagery, the relaxation training, meditation, um, we've experimented with. And I'm hoping that some of the ladies come on, particularly Kim McCullough, because she's probably maintaining this kind of work in an online fashion with her Female Hockey Association in Toronto. So I'm really curious. You've just been at it such a long time and an effective time and you seem to be transitioning into so many other sports.
No, it's always been. I mean, I've worked probably of the 40 sports I've worked with, I would certainly say hockey's the one I've worked with the most, without question. And, at all levels, from Pee Wee up to the NHL to Europe to mostly men, but a number of female athletes. The thing I did with women's sport at a high level was the Canadian women's soccer team. I worked with them for a couple of years. But yeah, I mean, I think there's some very basic things that apply to the guys. In some respects, maybe the women are more open to some of the emotional coaching, some of the mental coaching than are some of the guys.
Saul, yesterday we talked for some time. Thanks very much for taking the time. And we talked about Morris and his involvement with you over a long period of time. And you joined the session when Morris was on. Mm-hmm. And I know that everybody would enjoy the story you shared with me yesterday. I mentioned it to Morris on a text. I never knew he was coaching roller hockey.
Oh, yeah.
And that sort of, to me, we're a group of guys who like X's and O's, some way more than others. But the impact of your work in that situation really brought that point home to me. And I wonder if you could share that story. And
Sure.
Morris is on board; he could add to it.
Sure.
But I'd sure, I think everybody knowing Morris, but that story is something that, and with Ed being the general manager of the team,
yeah.
it would be it's a super one to kick off to engage some of the Sharks.
Well, I'd worked with Morris for, I guess, several seasons, a couple of seasons when he was with the LA Kings. And I think we had a really good relationship. And some years after he retired, Morris was coaching the Calgary Rads in the North American Roller Hockey League. And his brother Ed Lukowich, was the GM. And the team had, they played reasonably well, but they really struggled against the Vancouver Voodoo team, which was coached by Tiger Williams. And in the couple of games that they played the Voodoo in Vancouver, the Voodoo just absolutely decimated them. I think the goal differential was something like, if I remember correctly, something like 30-9 for the two games. And so in the playoffs, the Rads ended up having to play the Voodoo a single game knockout in Vancouver. And with the history between the two teams, certainly the Rad players weren't very confident. Morris called me up and he said, we're coming to Vancouver. We have this one game. The guys really don't think we have much of a chance. I wonder if you'd be willing to spend a day with us and see if there's something we could do to, refocus things. And they were staying at a hotel in North Vancouver, which is actually where I live most of the time. And I spent the day with them. And one of the things we spoke about a few things. I mean, I always would say that the mind is like this amazing super TV set. And if you don't like what you're thinking, you got to change the channel. And then I said to them, look, wolves, I always tell my athletes that, there's a quality we have as human beings. It's almost an angelic feature to our being, which is the ability to vision things and then manifest it. And the another quality we have, though, is that we're animals. We're not plants. And if we can bring some of that instinctive animal energy to the game, to the moment, we can perform with more power. And we talked about becoming like a team, a pack of wolves, and how wolves hunt together. They hunt in the pack. And there's this great Kipling quote where he said, and this is the law of the jungle, as old and as true as the sky, and the wolves that keep it will prosper, and the wolves that break it will die. Like the big snake girdles a tree trunk, this law runs forward and back. The strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack. And if we go out there as a pack, and we're forechecking, and their end, we're hunting pucks like a pack, and we're defending like a pack. And it just went on and on about this stuff, about being a pack of wolves. And anyway, the guys went out that evening, and they hunted like a pack of wolves, and we beat the Voodoo. And I remember after the game, the team went out. There was a very nice restaurant near the Coliseum, Vancouver, where we played. And the guys, when we went to the restaurant, and when we came into the restaurant, the guys were all howling like a pack of wolves, like, oh, and most of the patrons got a big kick out of it. But it certainly transformed things. And the Rads beat a pretty good Voodoo team that night. Is that how you remember it, Morris?
Yeah, so I'd like to actually show something from that.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Oh, yeah.
This was actually a picture that we got because Saul came and talked at the pregame meal, and so this was a picture we got. And at the time, the guys autographed it, although the autographs have faded over time. So it's that was back in about 1992. And the thing was, it was a very good talk by Saul. By the time it was finished, it was we could have thrown a piece of red meat out there, and they would have devoured it. They would have just scrapped for it, torn it apart. and we actually beat a very good Voodoo team, 7-6, and it was actually one of the most exciting games I've ever been involved in, and just the sacrifice and you know what was cool? It was the game started. The puck went up to one of their right wingers. It went from the defense to the right winger to one of their best goal scorers, and our defenseman came over. And he was a very good, but he was tough, and he just boomed this guy with a clean hit and sent him forward. And from that moment on, it was game on. And they knew, Tiger Williams, the Voodoo team knew they were in for a scrap, and it was just a very exciting game.
I don't remember, Morris. Why was it that Tiger ended up punching Ed? I don't remember exactly why that happened.
You know what? Actually, my brother Ed, who former world curling champion, was the general manager of the team. And before the game, we had a meeting with the referees, which I often thought was a bit of a waste of time. But anyways, so we went in, and the referees told us what the rules were going to be, or they were starting on it, and then Tiger said, well, this is a joke. I'm out of here. And so he started to leave. And then for whatever reason, Ed said, the only joke is that you're playing in this game. And Tiger stopped, and he turned around, and he came back, and he slugged Ed. Ed kind of moved, but he got his glasses knocked off, and it ended up the referees broke up the very first fight in the referee's room prior to the game. So it ended up that I got Tiger and got a hold of him. We were teammates in LA, so I think Tiger knew he'd sort of boo-boo when he did that. But you know what? Ed made a boo-boo when he opened up his mouth and said something, said that comment to Tiger. But anyway, so it was an interesting start to the game. But it was. And you know what? This was I went out and I bought that, I think, the day of the game, or I bought it and I brought it with us. But that was because we had talked about it beforehand, and Saul said this is what we're going to do, and so it was an exciting thing.
But the one thing I remember, Morris, it wasn't just the pre-game, pre-meal talk. I mean, I was there for several hours with these guys in the afternoon at the hotel.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just was a whole day. We would not have won without Saul's talk.
Well,
it was really expertly done. Thanks.
Okay.
To what degree does that kind of a story apply to the female game in terms of arousal, getting them fired up to the point where, the guys, it really works. And I shared stories with Saul about stuff that I had been through that worked. And it was like the seventh game of a 7-game series.
I think it'd really work, Wally.
I'll be with you in a minute.
Same motivation.
Oh, you want to leave it?
Yeah. So, Matt, any experience with anything like that?
Yeah, I think it's, after years of experience, you learn to sort of read the room, I guess. And one analogy that I've always liked, and I can't remember how I stumbled upon it, but it likened, whether it's true or not, but it likened male motivation to a totem pole and female motivation to a spider web. And if you can strengthen the webs within the spider web, then you're going to have a pretty strong team ready to go. And so I always try to work on those connections, and everyone's sort of connected to each other. And there is certainly a similarity between that analogy, I think, and the Wolfpack analogy. So I might use it in a different way, but it's kind of a group effort, and I found that that really, really worked. So there may not be, I don't point out a single leader and say follow her, because I find that often that female doesn't want that sort of position, oddly enough. And I also find that some of the other players might almost resent her in a crazy sort of way. So it really is focusing on the team and trying to get the strands of the spider web as strong as possible, and use that as sort of my mentality when I'm giving a talk like that. But I've certainly given a few positive, rah, we're a pack type speeches, I guess. And I never take credit for that stuff. It's always the players, but it seemed to work a few times.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, that working individually with female athletes, they absolutely, the ones I've worked with over the years, absolutely, there's never been an issue about buying into, when I ask them, pick an animal that gives you the feelings you'd want to have when you're on the ice. I mean, they'll pick lions and tigers and cheetahs and, panthers and all these different animals. And that's just something on an individual level that gives them a sense of, I'm hunting. I said, you're hunting pucks, you're hunting chances. You come over the boards and you're hunting. And I said, one of the big pluses about these predators is that if a lioness is after a zebra and the zebra leaps over a cliff and is gone, what does the lioness do? And they all say, it finds another. And I said, exactly. It's always next shift. So that when you're hunting, you have a good shift, you catch your breath, you get ready to go again. If it's a poor shift, you turn pucks over, you're out of position, you're not moving your feet, you come off the ice, you catch your breath, you get ready to go again. It's always next shift. And the other thing about those animals, those predators, they don't care a lot about what people think. They just hunt. Because I get so many times athletes are dealing with coaches who are hypercritical. And so the player ends up being very apprehensive about making a mistake. And I always say, what's the difference between the predator and the prey? The predator is assertive. The predator steps on the ice to make something happen. The prey doesn't want to make a mistake. So if coaches are overly critical, if they have negative eyes instead of positive eyes, what happens too frequently is not your superstars, but the other players are ones who tighten up and they're afraid of making a mistake. And I say, you can play okay like that, but you play great when you're hunting. And I always talk about these two fundamental human emotions. To me, these are the core human emotions, love and fear. And when you love it, I love it. Bring it on. We're playing those guys. I love it. They embrace the challenge. They play with power. Fear is, don't make a mistake. So it's challenging in coaching. It certainly is to provide feedback and at the same time, not create a situation when people are doing things you don't want them to do, to be putting out those negative statements which cause them to tense up.